Standing in my Martha's hospital room watching her take her last breath after 43 years of marriage, I never imagined my son Bradley would lean over her still warm body and whisper, "Don't expect a dime from Mom's $50 million estate, Dad. She told us everything goes to me and Sandra." His wife Sandra stood behind him, diamond earrings catching the fluorescent light as she smirked. "We're in charge now, Roland." But they had no idea Martha and I had prepared for this moment 20 years ago. The morning after Martha passed, I drove to our home in Westbrook, Connecticut, the colonial-style house where we'd raised Bradley and hosted countless family gatherings. My key wouldn't turn in the lock. I tried again, thinking grief was making me clumsy, but the mechanism had been changed entirely. Through the window, I could see Sandra directing movers, who were already boxing up Martha's collection of first-edition books. My hands shook as I called Bradley. He answered on the fifth ring, his voice carrying that false sympathy I'd grown to recognize over the past few years. "Dad, I was meaning to call you. Sandra and I thought it best to secure Mom's assets immediately. You understand, for estate purposes. Son, these are my belongings too. This is my home." "Was your home," he corrected smoothly. "Mom transferred the deed to us last year. Don't you remember you were there when she signed the papers?" I hadn't been there. Martha had been in the hospital that week for pneumonia, and I'd spent every moment by her side. The realization hit me like ice water. They'd forged documents while she was sick. At Brennan's funeral home, where Martha's body lay awaiting burial arrangements, I found Sandra stationed at a small table near the entrance. She'd set up what looked like a reception desk, complete with a laptop and credit card reader. As mourners arrived to pay respects, she intercepted them with a practiced smile. "There's a small administrative fee for estate documentation," she explained to Martha's cousin Ellen, who looked bewildered. $50. It helps us process the inheritance claims properly." "Inheritance claims?" Ellen asked. "I'm here to say goodbye to Martha." Sandra's smile tightened. "Of course. But since you're listed as a potential beneficiary, we need to document your visit. Bradley insists on proper protocol." I watched from the hallway as person after person handed over money too confused or polite to refuse. Martha's book club friends, her charity committee members, distant relatives who'd driven hours to be here. Sandra had turned my wife's funeral into a transaction counter. In the viewing room, Bradley stood near Martha's casket, but he wasn't mourning. His phone pressed to his ear. He spoke in hushed excitement. "Yes, waterfront property in Westbrook. 3 acres. My mother just passed and we're looking to move quickly. Can you come by tomorrow for an assessment?" My stomach churned. Martha's father had bought that land in 1952. She'd learned to swim in the cove behind the house, married me under the oak tree that shaded the back garden. Now, Bradley was haggling over its sale price while she lay 10 feet away. "The Nantucket cottage should fetch at least $4 million in this market," he continued. "And there's a penthouse in Manhattan, full Central Park views." Each word drove the knife deeper. These weren't just properties to Martha. The Nantucket cottage was where she'd written her first novel. The Manhattan penthouse had been her father's last gift before he died. Bradley reduced them all to numbers commodities to be flipped. Father Morrison, who'd known our family for 3 decades, approached Bradley after finishing his prayers over Martha's casket. "Your mother was deeply devoted to St. Catherine's. She mentioned wanting to establish a memorial fund for the youth program." Bradley's expression shifted to practiced sorrow. "Father, we'd love to honor her wishes, but the estate is complex. Perhaps we could discuss a more modest contribution. A plaque, maybe?" She specifically mentioned $200,000. Father Morrison persisted. "We discussed it last month." "I'm sure she was confused toward the end," Bradley said smoothly. "The medication affected her judgment. A $5,000 memorial plaque would be more appropriate, don't you think?" I wanted to scream that Martha's mind had been sharp until her final day, but I forced myself to remain quiet. Something in Martha's final weeks had warned me to be cautious, to watch and wait. Now I understood why. During the funeral planning meeting, Bradley had commandeered the director's office. Sandra sat beside him with a leather portfolio, checking off items like a business merger. I entered to find them debating flower arrangements. "Carnations are sufficient," Sandra declared. "The premium roses are an unnecessary expense." "Martha loved yellow roses," I interjected. "Her garden is full of them." Bradley barely glanced up. "We're full of them, Dad. We're having the garden professionally landscaped next week." Sandra's right. Carnations send the same message at a fraction of the cost. The funeral director, Mr. Brennan, shifted uncomfortably. "If I may, your mother pre-selected her arrangements years ago. Yellow roses, white lilies, and forget-me-nots from her own garden." "Pre-selected," Sandra's voice sharpened. "Without consulting the family, we'll need to see documentation." As they argued about flowers, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Mr. Roland, your locksmith appointment for tomorrow at 2 p.m. is confirmed." I hadn't called any locksmith. Then, I noticed the area code. It was from Martha's phone, but that was impossible. Her phone lay somewhere in Bradley's possession now. The meeting dragged on with battles over every detail. Music selections rejected, guest lists edited. Even Martha's burial dress became a point of contention. "The blue dress is too expensive to bury," Sandra insisted. "Something simpler would be prudent." "She wore that dress to Bradley's wedding," I said quietly. "She loved it." Loved, Bradley emphasized the past tense. "Dad, you need to accept that Mom is gone. We're in charge of these decisions now. Actually, about the family gathering after the service. Sandra and I feel it would be best if you didn't attend the main reception." The words hung in the air like a physical blow. "I'm not welcome at my own wife's funeral reception." "There will be important estate discussions," Sandra explained with false kindness. "We wouldn't want to overwhelm you during your time of grief. We've arranged a small coffee gathering at the church for you and some of Mom's older friends, more appropriate for your emotional state." They'd mapped out every detail, orchestrated each step to push me aside. But as I sat there watching them dismantle Martha's final wishes with surgical precision, I remembered something she'd told me 3 weeks before she died. "They think I'm losing my mind," she'd whispered during one of her lucid moments. "Let them believe it, Roland. Promise me you'll let them believe it." Now I understood. My brilliant Martha, even while fighting cancer, had been playing a longer game than any of us realized. That evening, alone in my small apartment, I sat with Martha's favorite book, a worn copy of Pride and Prejudice she'd read dozens of times. As I flipped through the pages, seeking comfort in something she'd touched, a small piece of paper fluttered onto my lap. Her handwriting steady, despite the cancer that ravaged her body. "If you're reading this, they've shown their true colors. Check our special place. All my love, M." My hands trembled as I held the note. Even facing death, Martha had thought 3 steps ahead. Whatever awaited in our special place. I knew it would change everything. Bradley and Sandra believed they'd won, but they'd forgotten who they were dealing with. Martha had been a chess champion in college, and she never played a game without seeing the ending first. 3 days after finding Martha's note, I stood in my apartment studying the antique mantel clock she'd given me for our 25th anniversary. Our special place had puzzled me until I remembered her words that day. "This clock will always keep our time, Roland. No matter what happens, our time together lives here." The clock hadn't worked in years, but I'd kept it for sentimental reasons. Now, examining it carefully, I noticed the back panel seemed loose. My fingers found a hidden latch, and inside, wrapped in plastic, lay a small brass key with a tag, Westbrook Savings and Loan Box 447. The next morning, I arrived at the bank as soon as it opened. The young teller, Amy, recognized me immediately. "Mr. Roland, I'm so sorry about Mrs. Martha. She was such a lovely person." "Thank you, Amy. I need to access a safety deposit box." She checked her computer, frowning slightly. "Box 447. That's odd. It's not linked to your joint accounts. This one was opened by Martha Chen." She looked up apologetically. That was her maiden name, wasn't it? She'll need to be present too. Oh, I'm so sorry. It's all right, I assured her, producing Martha's death certificate and the key. I believe she left provisions for me to access it. After several phone calls to the bank manager, they confirmed Martha had indeed listed me as the sole beneficiary with full access rights upon her death. Amy led me to the vault, her heels clicking against the marble floor. The box was larger than I'd expected, and heavy when I carried it to the private viewing room. Inside, I found several USB drives, a thick manila envelope, and a letter addressed to me in Martha's handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. My dearest Roland, if you're reading this, then Bradley and Sandra have revealed themselves as I feared they would. What you'll find here represents 5 years of careful documentation. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you sooner, but I needed them to believe they had fooled us both. The USB drives contain video recordings. The manila envelope has contact information for James Harrington, my father's former law partner. He has been expecting your call. I know this will be painful to watch, but you need to see who our son has become. Be strong, my love. Justice isn't revenge when it protects the innocent. Forever yours, Martha. I plugged the first USB drive into my laptop with trembling fingers. The screen filled with a video dated 3 years ago, showing Bradley and Sandra in what I recognized as Martha's study. They must not have known about the security camera hidden in the bookshelf. The old man is getting suspicious, Bradley said, rifling through papers on Martha's desk. We need to move faster. Sandra examined a document with a practiced eye. Your mother's power of attorney forms are almost perfect. I just need to adjust the date to when she was hospitalized. No one questions documents signed during medical emergencies. What about Dad? Your father. Sandra laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Please. He's so devoted to her he can't see what's happening under his nose. By the time Martha dies, we'll have everything transferred. He'll be lucky if we let him keep that pathetic apartment. The video continued for another 20 minutes, detailing their plans to drain Martha's investment accounts, transfer properties, and liquidate assets. They discussed nursing homes for me, with the casual cruelty of choosing a kennel for an unwanted dog. The second USB drive was dated 18 months ago. This time, the setting was a restaurant. Martha must have worn a recording device because the video showed Bradley and Sandra at their table, while Martha's voice occasionally interjected from off-camera. Mom, you really should update your will, Bradley pressed. Dad won't know how to handle such complex finances if something happens to you. Martha's voice was weaker than I remembered, already touched by the cancer that would eventually claim her. Your father has managed our finances for 40 years, dear. But you have so much more now, Sandra interjected. Your father's inheritance, the book royalties, the real estate investments. It's overwhelming for someone his age. I'll think about it, Martha replied. The camera caught Bradley and Sandra exchanging satisfied glances. After Martha excused herself, their conversation turned venomous. She's buying it, Sandra whispered. Keep playing the concerned son. Once she signs the new power of attorney, we can start moving assets. The Alzheimer's story is working perfectly, Bradley added. I told her doctor she's been forgetting things, getting confused. He's already noting cognitive decline in her records. My blood ran cold. They'd been planting evidence of dementia while Martha was fighting cancer, creating a paper trail to justify their theft. The third drive contained footage from just 2 months before Martha's death. The quality was crystal clear, showing Martha in a law office I didn't recognize. Across from her sat an elderly man in an expensive suit, James Harrington, according to the nameplate on his desk. They believe you're losing your mental faculties, James asked. Martha's laugh was weak, but genuine. Oh, James, they think they're so clever. Bradley actually hired an actor to pretend to be you. Last month had me sign all sorts of documents. As if I wouldn't recognize the man who taught me to ride a bicycle. You signed them. Everyone. Let them think they've won. Meanwhile, everything they're stealing belongs to the marital trust Roland and I established. The real inheritance father's trust they can't touch. It was structured to pass only through bloodline with specific provisions. $150 million, James mused. Charles would be proud of how you've grown it. It was never about the money, Martha said softly. But Bradley needs to learn that actions have consequences. When I'm gone, Roland will need protection from them. This recording and the others should ensure that. James leaned forward. And the will? Ironclad. Bradley can contest all he wants. The trust provisions are clear. Everything goes to Roland with specific instructions on how to handle Bradley's betrayal. If Bradley had shown 1 ounce of genuine love, if Sandra had treated Roland with basic respect, things might have been different. The final USB drive was labeled simply, "Watch Last." It showed Martha alone in her study, dated just a week before her final hospitalization. Her face was gaunt, but her eyes burned with determination. Roland, my love. She spoke directly to the camera. I know you'll blame yourself for not seeing this sooner, but don't. I hid it from you, because I needed to be certain. Bradley isn't evil, just weak and greedy. Sandra brought out the worst in him. What they don't know is that the $50 million they're so eager to steal was only ever the marital assets. My father's trust, the one established before we married, is worth 3 times that. They've been so focused on the small fortune, they forgot to look for the large one. James has all the documentation. He'll guide you through what comes next. But Roland, promise me something. Don't let hatred consume you. What we're doing isn't revenge. It's justice. And maybe it will teach Bradley the lesson I failed to teach him as a mother. I love you. I've loved you since the day you walked into my father's office, a young engineer with big dreams and kind eyes. Take care of yourself. And remember, grief is love with no place to go. Let it guide you to do what's right. One last thing. Check your email on the morning of the will reading. James will send you something that will help you play your part. Trust him. Trust the plan. Trust that I knew what I was doing. Until we meet again, my darling. The video ended, leaving me in tears. Martha had orchestrated everything, turning Bradley and Sandra's greed into the very rope that would hang them. She'd spent her final years not just fighting cancer, but protecting me and teaching our son a lesson he desperately needed to learn. The manila envelope contained James Harrington's business card and a brief note. Call me when you're ready. Martha made me promise to protect you. We have much to discuss. I gathered everything, returned the box to its slot, and left the bank. The weight of Martha's plan settled on my shoulders. She'd given me all the tools I needed. Now I had to find the courage to use them. That evening, I sat with her photo, running my fingers over her familiar smile. You always were smarter than all of us, I whispered. I won't let you down. Tomorrow, I would call James Harrington. The game Martha had started was far from over. Bradley and Sandra thought they held all the cards, but they'd never understood the most important rule of chess. The queen's sacrifice often leads to checkmate. The law offices of Harrington Masters and Associates occupied the top floor of a historic building in downtown Hartford. James Harrington himself greeted me at the elevator, his handshake firm, despite his 80 years. He'd been Martha's father's best friend and law partner, and I could see echoes of my late father-in-law in his shrewd eyes. Roland, he said warmly, leading me to his corner office. Martha spoke of you often in our recent meetings. She loved you very much. She mentioned you were helping her with something, I said, settling into a leather chair that probably cost more than my monthly rent. James poured 2 glasses of scotch from a crystal decanter. Martha came to me 3 years ago with suspicions about Bradley. She asked me to investigate quietly. What we found was troubling. He handed me a thick folder. Inside were bank statements, property records, and legal documents, all meticulously organized and annotated in Martha's neat handwriting. The scope of Bradley and Sandra's deception took my breath away. They've been siphoning money from Martha's charity foundation, I said, studying the evidence. The Martha Chen Foundation for Pediatric Cancer Research. She established it after her first remission. $2.3 million over 4 years, James confirmed. Disguised as administrative costs and consulting fees paid to shell companies Sandra controls. Your son signed off on every transaction as the foundation's treasurer. My stomach turned. Martha had created that foundation to help children fighting the same battle she'd faced. Every dollar stolen was treatment, denied research, unfunded hope extinguished. That's wire fraud, I said quietly. Federal crime. Among others, James agreed. There's also elder abuse, forgery, breach of fiduciary duty, and tax evasion. Martha documented everything, but she wanted to wait. She said Bradley needed to fully reveal his character before facing consequences. She was protecting him even then, I realized, hoping he'd change course. Until 2 months ago, James said, producing another document. This is when she discovered Sandra's affair with Marcus Webb, Bradley's business partner. That's when Martha decided enough was enough. The report from the private investigator was thorough. Photos of Sandra entering Marcus's apartment, credit card records from their hotel, stays, even text messages discussing their future together. After, the old woman dies, and we get the money. Does Bradley know? We don't believe so. He's been too focused on the inheritance to notice his wife's extracurricular activities. James paused, choosing his words carefully. There's something else. Sandra is 4 months pregnant. The timing suggests. It's not Bradley's. I finished. The investigator obtained DNA evidence that confirms Marcus Webb is the father. A water bottle from his gym, perfectly legal to collect once discarded. I set down the folder, overwhelmed by the layers of deception. My son was being betrayed by the very person he'd partnered with to betray his mother. There was a tragic poetry to it that Martha would have appreciated. Martha left specific instructions. James continued, opening his desk drawer. She wanted you to understand the full scope before the will reading. But Roland, we need to move carefully. Bradley and Sandra have scheduled a competency evaluation for you next week. What? They've petitioned the court to have you declared mentally incompetent. The paperwork claims you've shown signs of dementia, that you're unable to manage your affairs. They've even paid a doctor to support their claims without examining you. The audacity stunned me, but I forced myself to think like Martha would have. So, they plan to have me institutionalized and seize whatever assets remain in my name. Exactly. They've already put a deposit on a memory care facility. The cheapest one in the state, I might add. James's expression hardened. But Martha anticipated this too. I've arranged for Dr. Patricia Hernandez, the state's leading geriatric psychiatrist, to conduct an independent evaluation tomorrow. Her reputation is unimpeachable. Over the next 2 hours, James laid out Martha's complete plan. She'd thought of everything from the legal challenges Bradley might raise to the public relations war that would follow. Every move had a countermove, every attack a prepared defense. There's one thing that puzzles me, I said as our meeting concluded. The will reading is next week. Won't Bradley be suspicious if the will doesn't favor him? James smiled for the first time, and I caught a glimpse of the sharp legal mind that had built an empire alongside Martha's father. Roland, what Bradley doesn't know is that there are 2 wills. The one he thinks exists, leaving everything to him, and the real one executed with witnesses he's never met and security provisions he can't challenge. 2 wills. The forgeries Bradley arranged last year were actually for a dummy will I prepared. It leaves him everything just as he expects. He'll walk into that reading confident of victory. The real will, however, was executed at Mount Sinai Hospital during Martha's final stay, witnessed by the chief of staff and 2 senior judges who were visiting patients. Ironclad doesn't begin to describe it. As I left James's office, my phone buzzed with a text from Bradley. Dad, hope you're not making any trouble about the funeral arrangements. Remember, we're all grieving. See you at the will reading. Try to dress appropriately. I wanted to throw the phone against the wall, but instead I typed back, Of course, son. I understand my place. Let him think he'd won. Let Sandra count her stolen millions. Martha had taught me patience in our 43 years together. Now I would use that patience to honor her final wishes. That evening, I met with Dr. Patricia Hernandez at her office. She was younger than I'd expected, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that reminded me of Martha. "Mr. Roland, I understand your son is claiming you have dementia." "Among other things," I replied. "He needs me declared incompetent to complete his theft of his mother's estate." "I see." She made notes on her tablet. "Tell me about your daily routines, your memories of recent events, anything you think relevant." For the next 3 hours, she conducted the most thorough cognitive examination I'd ever experienced. Memory tests, problem-solving exercises, questions about current events, and personal history. By the end, I was exhausted, but confident. "Mr. Roland," she said, closing her tablet, "not only do you show no signs of cognitive decline, but your mental acuity is remarkable for any age. Your son's claims are entirely without merit. I'll have my report ready before any court hearing." "Thank you, doctor. May I ask why you're helping? This could put you at odds with some powerful people." She smiled sadly. "My mother died of Alzheimer's 5 years ago. The idea of someone weaponizing that horrible disease for financial gain. It's unconscionable. Besides, Martha donated $10 million to our research center. The least I can do is ensure her husband isn't victimized by false medical claims." As I drove home, I noticed a car following me. The investigator James had hired, no doubt ensuring my safety. Bradley and Sandra had shown they were capable of anything. But they'd made a crucial mistake. They'd underestimated both Martha and me. At my apartment, I found another note slipped under my door. Bradley's handwriting. "Dad forgot to mention. We've scheduled a family meeting next week before the will reading. Important decisions to discuss about your future care. Don't worry, we've already made all the arrangements." I crumpled the note and smiled grimly. They'd made arrangements all right. But so had Martha, and hers were far more thorough. The next few days passed in a blur of secret meetings and careful preparations. I met with federal prosecutors about the charity fraud, spoke with financial forensics experts about the asset theft, and coordinated with James on the timing of each revelation. Through it all, I played the part of the grieving, confused widower. When Bradley called, I sounded appropriately addled. When Sandra visited to check on me, I let her see the scattered papers and unwashed dishes that suggested a man struggling to cope. "Poor Roland," she said to Bradley on the phone, not realizing I could hear from the next room. "He's deteriorating faster than we thought. The facility can't take him soon enough." Let them believe it. Martha's ghost seemed to whisper in my ear. Let them walk into the trap, believing victory is assured. The best generals win the war before the battle begins. 5 days before the will reading, I received an encrypted email from James. The subject line read, "The Queen's Gambit." Inside was a single line of text. "All pieces are in position. Your move." I looked at Martha's photo on my nightstand, her knowing smile seeming to approve. "Almost there, my love," I whispered. Just a little longer. The game she'd started was entering its final phase. Bradley and Sandra had taken the bait, swallowed the hook, and now swam confidently toward what they believed was triumph. They had no idea that Martha had turned the entire ocean into a net, and I held the strings. The week before, the will reading found me in a conference room at the Federal Building in Hartford, facing Assistant U.S. Attorney Rebecca Thornton. She was young, sharp, and had the hungry look of a prosecutor who'd just been handed a career-making case. "Mr. Roland, the evidence your wife compiled is extraordinary," she said, spreading documents across the table. "The theft from the Martha Chen Foundation alone constitutes multiple federal crimes. We're talking about money meant for dying children." "That's what hurts the most," I admitted. Martha survived pediatric cancer because her father could afford experimental treatment. She created the foundation so other families would have the same chance. And your son stole from it to fund his lifestyle. Rebecca said bluntly. These receipts show luxury cars, jewelry, vacations to Europe, all paid with Foundation credit cards. FBI Special Agent David Park leaned forward. We've been monitoring the Foundation's accounts. Your son transferred another 100,000 just yesterday, probably to pay for your wife's funeral expenses. He's using charity funds meant for cancer research to bury the woman who created the charity. The irony would have been poetic if it weren't so sickening. I thought of Martha's face when she'd established the Foundation, the joy of her first successful fundraiser, the tears when she'd met children whose treatments the Foundation funded. All of it tainted by Bradley's greed. When do you plan to arrest him? I asked. That depends on you, Rebecca replied. Your wife's plan was specific. She wanted the arrests to happen at the will reading maximum public impact. She said, and I quote, Bradley values his reputation above all else. Let him lose it in front of everyone who matters to him. Even in death, Martha understood our son better than he understood himself. Bradley had inherited her intelligence, but none of her wisdom, her ambition, but none of her compassion. There's been a development, Agent Park added, producing surveillance photos. Sandra Webb met with Marcus yesterday. They were discussing plans to leave the country after securing the inheritance. We intercepted communications about transferring funds to accounts in the Cayman Islands. Webb, I noted. She's already using his name. Apparently, she plans to file for divorce immediately after the will reading. She's confident the inheritance will be hers, regardless of marital status, since she believes Martha left everything to Bradley individually, not as marital assets. Another miscalculation. Martha had been careful to structure her bequests in ways that would protect them from Sandra's machinations. Every dollar would be tied up in trusts, with conditions Sandra could never meet. After the federal meeting, I drove to the offices of Whitfield Crane and Associates, Martha's father's old law firm. They'd handled the Chen family interests for 3 generations, and the senior partners had watched Martha grow from a precocious child into a formidable woman. Roland, Jeffrey Whitfield, greeted me, his handshake still firm at 91. I've been expecting you. James Harrington said you'd need our services. Martha's father trusted you with his legacy, I said. Now I need your help protecting it from his grandson. Jeffrey's expression hardened. Charles Chen would spin in his grave if he knew what Bradley had done. That boy had every advantage, every opportunity, and he chose thievery over honor. For the next 3 hours, we reviewed the trust documents that protected the bulk of Martha's inheritance. Charles Chen had been a brilliant businessman, but an even better judge of character. He'd structured his fortune with provisions that seemed prescient now. The bloodline trust is unbreakable, Jeffrey explained. It passes to Martha's direct descendants, only if they meet certain moral clauses. Criminal conviction, fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, all grounds for disinheritance. Bradley's actions have disqualified him completely. What about his children, Bradley's kids from his first marriage? Protected, Jeffrey assured me. Martha established education trusts for them years ago, completely separate from Bradley's control. She knew he'd use them as pawns otherwise. I thought of my grandchildren Tyler and Emma, whom Sandra had systematically alienated from our family. They deserved better than the father they'd drawn in life's lottery. My next stop was an unremarkable office building in Stamford, where forensic accountant Dr. Sarah Chen, no relation to Martha, had spent weeks analyzing the financial theft. It's beautifully documented. She told me her admiration professional, rather than personal. Your wife created a paper trail that any prosecutor would dream of. Every transaction, every forged document, every falsified report. She even managed to get Bradley and Sandra on video discussing their plans. How much did they steal in total? From the Foundation, $2.3 million. From her personal accounts, another $4 million. Real estate transfers that haven't completed yet would have netted them approximately $15 million more. She paused. But here's the interesting part. They were so focused on the visible assets, they never looked for the hidden ones. Hidden assets. Your wife was brilliant, Mr. Roland. She created a series of LLCs and investment vehicles over the past 5 years, all legally separate from the marital assets Bradley knew about. She moved money gradually, carefully, always staying within legal boundaries. The 50 million Bradley thinks represents her entire estate. That's maybe 20% of the real number. I felt a surge of pride. Even while fighting cancer, enduring chemotherapy that left her weak and nauseated, Martha had been executing a complex financial strategy that would have challenged a healthy person half her age. She left detailed instructions for after the will reading, Sarah continued. Every asset Bradley doesn't know about has been placed in trusts with you as the sole beneficiary. Even if he contests the will, which he certainly will, he can't challenge assets he doesn't know exist. The final meeting of the day was with Dr. Patricia Hernandez, who'd completed her competency evaluation. I've filed my report with the court, she informed me. Not only are you completely competent, but your cognitive function tests in the 95th percentile for men your age. I've also included a professional opinion that anyone claiming otherwise is either grossly mistaken or deliberately lying. Bradley won't give up easily, I warned. I've handled cases like this before, she said grimly. Adult children who view their parents as ATMs rather than human beings. I've already alerted Adult Protective Services about the attempted forced institutionalization. They take a dim view of financial elder abuse. As I prepared to leave, she handed me an envelope. Your wife asked me to give this to you 1 week before the will reading. She said you'd know when to use it. Inside was a single sheet of paper with Martha's handwriting. Remember, darling, Oscar Wilde said we are all in the gutter, but some of us are looking at the stars. Bradley's been staring at the gutter so long he's forgotten the stars exist. Time to remind him. All my love, M. That evening, I sat in my apartment reviewing everything we'd set in motion. Federal prosecutors ready to arrest Bradley and Sandra for fraud. Financial experts prepared to testify about the theft. Medical professionals ready to defend my competency. A legal team that had spent months preparing for every possible challenge. But the masterstroke was yet to come. James Harrington had sent word that the will reading would be moved to the main conference room at his firm, the one with the glass walls overlooking downtown Hartford. Bradley had insisted on inviting his business associates and society friends wanting to celebrate his inheritance publicly. Let him, James had said. The more witnesses to his humiliation, the better. Your wife specifically requested we accommodate any guests he wanted to bring. I looked at the invitation Bradley had sent, gilt-edged and ostentatious, the estate of Martha Chen Pierce, distribution of assets, reception to follow. He'd already planned his victory party. My phone buzzed with a text from Sandra. Roland, don't forget the family meeting tomorrow. We've made all the arrangements for your transition to assisted living. It's for the best. I typed back, I'll be there. Thank you for taking care of everything. Let them savor their anticipated triumph a little longer. Martha had taught me that the best victories were those the enemy never saw coming. They thought they were herding a confused old man into a trap. They had no idea they were walking into a carefully constructed maze where every path led to their own destruction. Tomorrow, the family meeting. Next week, the will reading. And then finally, justice for Martha. Not the violent revenge of passion, but the cold, calculated justice of the law. The kind that stripped away everything they'd schemed for and left them with nothing but the consequences of their choices. I raised a glass of Martha's favorite wine to her photo. Almost there, my love. The board has set the pieces in motion. Time to show them what happens when they underestimate a Chen woman, even in death. The wine tasted of memories and promises. Outside, Hartford glittered in the darkness, unaware that in a week's time, one of its most prominent families would implode in the most spectacular fashion. Martha had written the script. Now, I just had to play my part. The queen was off the board, but her strategy remained. And in chess, as in life, the queen's sacrifice often preceded the king's victory. The morning of the will reading dawned crisp and clear. One of those perfect New England autumn days, Martha had loved. I dressed carefully in the suit she'd bought me for our 40th anniversary, still slightly too large after the weight I'd lost during her illness. The reflection in the mirror showed a man who appeared every one of his 68 years, perhaps more. Perfect for the role I needed to play. Bradley had texted the night before, his message dripping with false concern. "Dad, remember the reading is at 10 sharp. Sandra and I will pick you up at 9:30. Please try to look presentable." I'd responded with careful misspellings. "Thank you, son. We'll be ready." Let him think the stress had finally broken me. At 9:15, I shuffled around my apartment, strategically placing items to suggest confusion. Reading glasses in the refrigerator, slippers in the kitchen sink. Martha's photo turned face down on the table, as if I couldn't bear to look at it. The stage was set. When Bradley and Sandra arrived, I answered the door in mismatched socks, my shirt partially untucked. Sandra's eyes lit up with satisfaction, while Bradley's face showed a mixture of pity and disgust. "Dad didn't. We talk about taking better care of yourself." Bradley said, his voice loud and slow, as if I were deaf as well as demented. "Here, let me help with your tie." As he adjusted my tie with patronizing movements, I caught sight of Sandra in the hallway mirror. She was texting rapidly, a small smile playing on her lips. Through careful observation over the past week, I'd learned to read her expressions. That particular smile meant she was messaging Marcus. The drive to Hartford took place in Bradley's new Bentley, a car he couldn't have afforded on his legitimate salary. Sandra sat in front, occasionally turning to check on me with theatrical concern. "Are you comfortable, Roland?" she asked. "Not too confused by all this?" "Martha," I mumbled, letting my eyes go unfocused. "Where's Martha?" Bradley and Sandra exchanged triumphant glances. Their silent communication was clear. The old fool was perfect for their plans. A few more displays like this at the reading, and no one would question their decision to institutionalize me. The offices of Harrington Masters and Associates buzzed with activity when we arrived. Bradley had indeed invited an audience to his anticipated victory. I recognized several of his business partners, society friends who'd snubbed Martha during her illness, and even a reporter from the Hartford Courant's business section. Bradley Pierce. The reporter approached with her recorder. "How does it feel to be inheriting the Chen family fortune?" Bradley affected a mournful expression. "Today isn't about money, Ms. Patterson. It's about honoring my mother's legacy and ensuring her charitable work continues." I nearly choked on the irony, but covered it with a coughing fit that had Sandra patting my back with exaggerated concern. The main conference room was impressive, all glass and chrome, with a view of the Connecticut River. About 30 people had gathered, turning what should have been a private family matter into a public spectacle. Exactly as Martha had predicted. Champagne. A server approached with a tray. "After the reading," Bradley said smoothly, "we're not here to celebrate." But the champagne was already chilling the victory party already planned. I noticed finger foods arranged on a side table, florist arrangements that seemed more suited to a wedding than a will reading. Sandra had been busy. James Harrington entered precisely at 10, followed by 2 associates carrying boxes of documents. His expression was professionally neutral, but I caught the slight tightening around his eyes as he surveyed Bradley's assembled audience. "Good morning," James began, his voice carrying the authority of 5 decades of legal practice. "Before we begin, I must note that will readings are typically private affairs. However, since Mr. Bradley Pierce has insisted on this gathering, we'll proceed." "My mother would have wanted her friends here," Bradley said smoothly. "She was a public figure after all." "Indeed," James replied dryly. "Now, if everyone will take their seats." Bradley and Sandra positioned themselves at the head of the table, the power positions they'd assumed they deserved. I was guided to a chair near the corner, the kind staff might offer an elderly relative they were humoring. Several of Bradley's friends smirked at my apparent confusion. "First," James continued, "I must verify that all interested parties are present. Bradley Pierce." "Here," Bradley responded with satisfaction. "Sandra Pierce." Present, she preened. Roland Pierce. I looked up slowly, as if processing the question. That's me, isn't it? More smirks from Bradley's gallery. Sandra actually patted my hand condescendingly. Now, James said, opening a leather folder. We have several preliminary matters to address. Mrs. Martha Chen Pierce left very specific instructions for these proceedings. Of course she did, Bradley muttered, but his smile remained confident. James produced a sealed envelope. First, she requested this be read before the will itself. He broke the seal and unfolded a single page. Martha's handwriting was visible even from my corner seat, and I saw Bradley lean forward unconsciously. James cleared his throat and began, My dear family and friends, if you are hearing this, then my journey has ended, but my plans have not. Today, truths will be revealed, justice will be served, and those who showed their true character in my final months will receive exactly what they deserve. The room had gone very quiet. Bradley's smile flickered uncertainty for the first time. I spent the last 5 years of my life watching, documenting, and preparing. James continued reading. Every betrayal was noted, every kindness remembered, every crime recorded. Today, the scales balance. Crime, Sandra whispered to Bradley. What does she mean, crime? But James was still reading. To those who came today expecting to celebrate my death with champagne and finger foods, I hope you enjoy the performance. It will be the last celebration some of you attend for quite some time. Now the room was electric with tension. Several of Bradley's business associates shifted uncomfortably. The reporter had her recorder out, sensing a bigger story than expected. Before we proceed to the will itself, James said, setting aside the letter, I'm required to inform you that federal agents are present in the building. Any attempt to leave before these proceedings conclude will be considered flight risk. Bradley shot to his feet. What the hell is this? Please sit down, Mr. Pierce, James said calmly. All will be explained momentarily. Now, shall we begin with the will itself? Bradley sank back into his chair, his face cycling through confusion, anger, and the first hints of fear. Sandra grabbed his arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his sleeve. The last will and testament of Martha Chen Pierce. James began, his voice filling the room. Executed on September 15th of this year at Mount Sinai Hospital, in the presence of Chief of Staff Dr. Margaret Winters, the Honorable Judge Patricia Chen of the Connecticut Supreme Court, and the Honorable Judge Robert Matthews of the Federal District Court. September 15th. Bradley's voice cracked. But she signed her will in March. I was there. You were present for a signing in March. James agreed. However, that document was superseded by this one, executed with witnesses of unimpeachable reputation, while Mrs. Pierce was demonstrably of sound mind and body. This is ridiculous, Sandra snapped. We have power of attorney. Any will signed without our knowledge is invalid. James smiled thinly. The power of attorney you reference was obtained through fraud, Mrs. Pierce. We have video evidence of you discussing the forgery with your husband. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Shall we continue with the reading? The blood drained from Sandra's face. She turned to Bradley, who looked like he'd been punched. Around the room, their invited guests began to realize they were witnessing something far different from the victory celebration they'd expected. I, Martha Chen Pierce. James read, Being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament, revoking all previous wills and codicils. He paused, letting the weight of those words sink in. Every document Bradley thought he controlled, every arrangement he'd manipulated, had just become worthless paper. First, James continued, I address the disposition of my beloved husband, Roland Matthew Pierce. All eyes turned to me. I maintained my confused expression, even as my heart pounded with anticipation. This was it, the moment Martha had planned so carefully. To my husband, who showed me 43 years of unwavering love, who held my hand through every chemotherapy session, who never once complained, as I grew sicker, And more difficult, I leave the entirety of my estate, both known and unknown assets, to be held in the Roland Pierce Revocable Trust with the following provisions. The room exploded. Bradley was on his feet again, his face purple with rage. That's impossible. She wasn't in her right mind. She had dementia. Sit down, Mr. Pierce. A new voice commanded from the doorway. Assistant U.S. Attorney Rebecca Thornton entered flanked by 2 FBI agents. You'll have plenty of opportunity to discuss your mother's mental state during your federal fraud trial. The trap had been sprung. Around the room exits were blocked by federal agents who'd been waiting for James's signal. The reporter was frantically taking notes, her routine business story transformed into front-page news. But James wasn't finished. He continued reading, his voice cutting through the chaos. To my son, Bradley Pierce, and his wife, Sandra Pierce, I leave the sum of $1 each, along with the following message. The room fell silent again, everyone straining to hear Martha's final words to her son. Bradley. James read, I gave you everything a mother could give. Love, education, opportunities, and values. You kept only what you could sell. Your inheritance is the truth about who you are, revealed to all who mistook you for the man I tried to raise. May you find in prison the humility that privilege never taught you. Bradley collapsed into his chair, his world crumbling around him. But there was more to come. The will's first line had indeed crushed them, but Martha's justice was just beginning. James Harrington waited for the chaos to subside before continuing, his voice steady as granite. Now, let me continue with the specific provisions of Mrs. Pierce's estate. This is entrapment! Sandra shrieked, her composure finally cracking. You can't do this. We have rights. You have the right to remain silent, Agent Park said, stepping forward. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Not yet, Rebecca Thornton interjected, holding up a hand. Let's finish the reading first. I believe Mrs. Pierce wanted her son to understand the full scope of what he's lost. James nodded gratefully and returned to the will. The estate, known as the Martha Chen Pierce Holdings, consists of the following assets to be distributed according to these provisions. As he began listing the property's accounts and investments, I watched Bradley's face transform. With each revelation, his eyes widened further. The $50 million he'd thought represented Martha's entire fortune was revealed as merely the tip of an iceberg. The Chen Family Trust, established by my father, Charles Chen, in 1968, currently valued at $153 million. What? Bradley's voice was barely a whisper. There's no Chen Family Trust. I would have known. The MCP investment portfolio, established through quiet accumulation over 30 years, valued at $48 million. Real estate holdings in Connecticut, New York, Massachusetts, and California, collectively valued at $35 million, including properties held through LLCs that my son never bothered to investigate. Sandra was frantically calculating on her phone, her face growing paler with each addition. The reporter had given up taking notes and was simply recording everything, sensing a Pulitzer-worthy story unfolding. In total, James summarized, the estate's value exceeds $250 million, not including the ongoing royalties from Mrs. Pierce's novels and the various patents from her collaborations with her husband's engineering firm. $250 million, Bradley repeated numbly. But we only found... You found what Mrs. Pierce allowed you to find, James said coldly. She spent 5 years documenting your theft while moving the real assets beyond your reach. Every dollar you stole was marked, tracked, and recorded. She knew about the gambling debts, Mr. Pierce, the ones you hid from your wife. Gambling debts. Sandra turned on Bradley. What gambling debts? Approximately $8 million owed to various casinos and private bookmakers, James supplied helpfully. Paid ironically with money stolen from the Martha Chen Foundation for Pediatric Cancer Research. Perhaps we should move on to the video evidence, Rebecca Thornton suggested. Mrs. Pierce was quite thorough in her documentation. A screen descended from the ceiling, and the lights dimmed. Martha's face appeared recorded in this very room, just 2 months before her death. She looked frail, but determined every inch the woman I'd fallen in love with decades ago. "Hello, Bradley." Her recorded voice filled the room. "If you're watching this, then you've discovered the truth. Yes, I knew everything. Every forged document, every stolen dollar, every cruel word you thought I was too sick or too medicated to understand." On screen, Martha held up a folder. "This contains 5 years of evidence. Hidden cameras in my study captured you and Sandra planning your theft. Bank records show every fraudulent transfer. Private investigators documented Sandra's affair with Marcus Webb, complete with DNA evidence that the child she's carrying isn't yours." "What?" Bradley spun to face Sandra, who had gone sheet white. "Marcus. You and Marcus." "Oh, Bradley." Martha's voice continued with something like pity. "You were so busy stealing from me. You couldn't see that your partner was stealing something far more precious from you. Trust. Just as you stole mine." The screen shifted to security footage from Martha's study, dated 3 years ago. Bradley and Sandra were clearly visible discussing their plans. Once the old bat finally dies, Sandra's recorded voice said clearly, "We can dump Roland in the cheapest home we can find. Maybe that place in Bridgeport with all the health violations. He won't last 6 months there." "And if he complains?" Bradley's younger self asked. "Who'd listen to a senile old man?" Sandra laughed. "We'll have all the documents showing he's incompetent. I've already got Dr. Hoffman lined up to sign whatever we need." The recording continued, each word another nail in their coffin. They discussed draining charity funds, selling Martha's properties, liquidating her literary estate. They joked about spending her money while she lay dying. They mocked her faith in her son's goodness. "I kept hoping," Martha's face returned to the screen, "that you would show one moment of genuine love, one instant of real grief for the mother you were losing. Instead, you complained about how long I was taking to die." Several people in the room gasped. Even Bradley's friends looked disgusted now, edging away from him, as if his greed might be contagious. "But the cruelest betrayal," Martha continued, "was what you did to those children. The ones whose cancer treatments depended on the foundation bearing my name. You stole their hope to buy Sandra's jewelry. You traded their lives for your luxury cars." "Turn it off," Bradley begged. "Please turn it off." "Not yet," Martha's recorded voice said, as if anticipating his plea. "You need to see what else I discovered." The screen showed financial records, a complex web of transactions that Sarah Chen had helped us unravel. "You weren't just stealing from me, Bradley. You were stealing from your business partners too. Skimming from joint accounts, inflating expenses, charging personal purchases to company credit cards. Did you really think no one would notice?" Around the room, Bradley's business associates were pulling out phones, their faces dark with rage. The society friends who'd come to celebrate were backing toward the exits, desperate to distance themselves from the unfolding scandal. "Mrs. Pierce knew you would contest the will," James said as the video ended. "So, she took additional precautions. The Chen family trust, which represents the bulk of the estate, was never part of the marital assets. It passes through bloodline only with specific moral clauses." He produced another document. "Any beneficiary convicted of a felony fraud or breach of fiduciary duty is automatically disinherited. Your actions over the past 5 years have disqualified you completely, Mr. Pierce." "But there's more," Rebecca Thornton announced. "Mrs. Pierce didn't just document financial crimes. She recorded conversations where you and your wife discussed manipulating her medication, keeping her sedated so she wouldn't interfere with your plans. That's attempted murder, Mr. Pierce." "We never gave her anything," Bradley protested. We just talked about it." "Conspiracy to commit murder," Agent Park corrected. "Still a federal crime, especially when crossing state lines to discuss it. Those trips to New York to meet with Sandra's pharmaceutical contact, we have those recorded too." Sandra broke free from Bradley's grip, and made a run for the door, her heels clicking frantically on the marble floor. She didn't make it 3 steps before an agent intercepted her. "Going somewhere, Mrs. Pierce?" the agent asked. "We have questions about those Cayman Island accounts you've been setting up." As they placed Sandra in handcuffs, her phone fell from her purse. The screen lit up with a message from Marcus. "Is it done? Do we have the money?" "Oh, Marcus will be joining you shortly," Rebecca assured her. "We picked him up an hour ago. He's already trying to make a deal claiming everything was your idea." "That bastard," Sandra struggled against the handcuffs. "It was his plan. He said if I got pregnant, I could claim part of the inheritance regardless of the will." "Sandra, shut up," Bradley shouted, but it was too late. "Interesting," Rebecca mused. "Please continue. This is all being recorded." The complete collapse of their scheme was beautiful in its thoroughness. Every escape route they might have taken had been anticipated and blocked. Every lie they'd told was countered with documented truth. Every cruel act was met with consequences. "Mr. Roland Pierce," James said, formally turning to me. "Per your wife's instructions, the entirety of her estate passes to you, to be held in trust with specific provisions for charitable giving. She named you sole trustee, with complete discretion over distributions." I stood slowly, letting the confused old man facade drop away. My voice when I spoke was clear and strong. "Thank you, James. Martha always said justice should be educational. I believe Bradley and Sandra are getting quite an education today." The shock on Bradley's face when he heard my clear voice was almost worth everything. "Dad, but you were playing the part Martha asked me to play," I said simply. "She knew you'd underestimate a grieving old man. She counted on it, actually. Just as she counted on your greed, blinding you to the truth. You were so busy counting money, that wasn't yours. You never noticed the FBI investigation, the forensic accountants, or the fact that every single document you forged was actually prepared by James here, designed to be easily traceable. You knew," Bradley's voice broke. "You knew this whole time." "I learned the truth 2 weeks ago," I admitted. "Martha left me detailed instructions. She said the hardest part would be letting you think you'd won watching you celebrate her death. She was right. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. But she also said, justice delayed is not justice denied, and she wanted your victims to see you fall." Around the room, phones were recording everything. By nightfall, Bradley and Sandra Pierce would be the most reviled couple in Connecticut. The scandal would destroy not just their freedom, but their reputations, their social standing, everything they'd valued more than family. "One more thing," James announced. "Mrs. Pierce left specific instructions for the distribution of certain assets. The Martha Chen Foundation for Pediatric Cancer Research will receive an immediate infusion of $50 million, restoring everything stolen, plus additional funding for the next decade. She also established educational trusts for her grandchildren Tyler and Emma, ensuring their futures regardless of their father's actions." As the federal agents moved in to arrest Bradley and Sandra, I heard my son's voice one last time. "Dad, please. I'm your son. Help me." I looked at him, seeing not the man he'd become, but the boy he'd been, the one who'd helped his mother plant roses in the garden, who'd cried when our dog died, who'd once had the capacity for love before greed consumed him. "I am helping you, son," I said quietly. "Your mother believed that facing consequences was the only way you might redeem yourself. She never gave up hoping you'd remember who you were raised to be. Neither have I. This isn't the end of your story, Bradley. It's a chance to write a better chapter." The agents led them away, as cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions. The office that had hosted their expected triumph became the stage for their complete downfall, just as Martha had planned. The immediate aftermath of the will reading was a symphony of consequences. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I watched federal agents escort Bradley and Sandra to separate vehicles. Bradley stumbled on the steps, his expensive suit no armor against the reality crushing down on him. Sandra fought every step, her designer heels scraping against concrete, as she screamed about lawsuits and rights. Mr. Pierce. Rebecca Thornton approached me as the room emptied. Your wife would have been proud. This is one of the most comprehensive fraud cases we've ever prosecuted. The evidence she compiled will ensure convictions. What happens now? I asked, though Martha's letters had prepared me for most of it. Arraignment within 48 hours. Given the amount stolen and the conspiracy charges, bail will be substantial if granted at all. The charity fraud alone carries up to 20 years. Add the elder abuse forgery and conspiracy charges. She shook her head. Your son is looking at spending most of his remaining years in federal prison. Strange how those words should have hurt more. My son, my only child, facing decades behind bars. But all I could think about was Martha in her hospital bed, tears running down her face as she discovered the depth of Bradley's betrayal. He made his choices, I said simply. Over the following days, the scandal exploded across Connecticut and beyond. The Hartford Courant ran a series titled The $50 Million Betrayal, complete with photos from the will reading. Social media erupted with discussions of greed, family loyalty, and justice. The security footage of Sandra calling me a senile old man went viral, becoming a cautionary tale about elder abuse. Marcus Webb, desperate to save himself, provided investigators with thousands of text messages between himself and Sandra. Their affair had begun 2 years ago, built on a shared fantasy of inheriting Martha's fortune. He revealed Sandra's pregnancy was deliberately timed, a calculated move to ensure she'd have leverage in any inheritance dispute. She said Bradley was too stupid to notice, Marcus told investigators in a recorded interview that made the evening news. She played the devoted wife while planning to take everything in the divorce. The forensic accountants found more than even Martha had documented. Bradley's theft extended to his business partners, his clients, even his children's college funds. The total approached $12 million, a monument to greed that shocked even hardened investigators. Dr. Hoffman, the physician Bradley and Sandra had bribed to declare me incompetent, lost his medical license within a week. The memory care facility they'd chosen for me, investigated after the scandal broke, was shut down for numerous violations. Every thread of their plan, when pulled, revealed more corruption beneath. But justice wasn't only punitive. Following Martha's detailed instructions, I met with the board of the Martha Chen Foundation for Pediatric Cancer Research. The $50 million restoration was announced at a press conference, along with plans to expand the foundation's reach. My wife believed every child deserved a fighting chance against cancer, I told the assembled reporters. Her own son's betrayal of that vision was her deepest heartbreak. Today, we restore not just funding, but faith in her mission. Dr. Patricia Yamamoto, the foundation's medical director, could barely contain her tears. We had to cancel 3 research trials due to the missing funds. Now we can not only restart them, but expand our treatment assistance program. Mrs. Pierce's legacy will save lives that might have been lost. 2 weeks after the arrests, I visited Bradley at the Federal Detention Center. He looked haggard in his orange jumpsuit, a far cry from the man who'd sneered at me over his mother's deathbed. The arrogance had drained away, leaving something hollow and desperate. Why was all he said when he sat across from me, separated by reinforced glass. That's what your mother wanted to know, I replied. Why a son raised with every advantage would choose greed over love. Why you would steal from dying children to fund your lifestyle. Why you would plan to abandon the father who changed your diapers and taught you to ride a bike. It was Sandra, he began, but I held up my hand. No, son. Sandra encouraged your worst impulses, but the impulses were yours. Your mother documented your financial irregularities from before you even met her. You chose this path step by step, decision by decision. I never meant for it to go so far, he whispered. It started small, a few thousand here and there. Then Sandra said Mom would never notice that she had so much money it didn't matter. Every dollar mattered, I said firmly. Not because of its value, but because of what it represented. Trust, love, the belief that her son was the man she raised him to be. Bradley's eyes filled with tears. For the first time since he was a child, I saw genuine emotion crack his facade. Can you ever forgive me? Your mother forgave you, even as she exposed you, I told him. She said justice and forgiveness weren't opposites, but partners. You're facing justice now. Forgiveness will come when you've earned it, when you've genuinely changed, not just because you got caught. The kids, he said suddenly. Tyler and Emma. Sandra won't let me see them. Sandra's facing her own problems, I reminded him. She's been denied bail as a flight risk. As for your children, your ex-wife Melissa has temporary custody. I've been in touch with her. The education trusts your mother established will ensure they have opportunities despite their parents' choices. We sat in silence for a moment before Bradley spoke again. 25 to 30 years. That's what my lawyer says I'm facing. I'll be an old man when I get out if I get out. Then, use those years wisely, I suggested. Your mother believed in redemption. She left you $1, not out of cruelty, but as a symbol. You can build something from that dollar, even from prison. Teach others about the cost of greed. Write letters to Tyler and Emma explaining why their father is away and how they can avoid your mistakes. Become the man your mother always hoped you could be. 6 months later, I stood in Martha's garden behind the Westbrook house. The roses she'd planted were blooming yellow petals bright against green leaves. The house Bradley had tried to steal had become the headquarters for the expanded Martha Chen Foundation. Her study, where she documented his betrayal, now hosted support groups for families dealing with pediatric cancer. Sandra had been sentenced to 15 years her pregnancy, no shield against justice. The child, a daughter, was placed with Marcus Webb's sister, who seemed determined to raise her away from the shadow of her parents' crimes. Bradley received 28 years eligible for parole in 20 with good behavior. He'd begun teaching literacy classes to fellow inmates, a small step toward redemption. You did it, my love, I said to Martha's photograph now hanging in the foundation's main hall. You taught them the lesson they needed to learn. Tyler and Emma visited monthly, slowly learning to trust their grandfather again after Sandra's poisonous influence. I told them stories of their grandmother, the brilliant woman who'd turned betrayal into justice, who'd loved them enough to protect their futures, even while exposing their father's crimes. The estate Martha had protected now served her true vision. Scholarships for young writers, research grants for pediatric oncology support programs for families in crisis. Every dollar Bradley had tried to steal was multiplied tenfold in service to others. As I walked through the garden, I noticed a new rose bush blooming near the bench where Martha used to sit. I hadn't planted it, but there it was, yellow petals perfect in the afternoon sun. The gardener claimed ignorance, suggesting it must have self-seeded from Martha's original plants. I knew better. Some things transcended explanation. Martha's final message wasn't just in her will or her carefully orchestrated justice. It was in the beauty that persisted, despite betrayal, the love that outlasted greed, the hope that bloomed even in the shadow of loss. That evening, I hosted dinner for the foundation board, the FBI team, who'd helped secure justice, and the prosecutors who'd ensured Bradley and Sandra faced consequences. We raised glasses to Martha's memory, not in sorrow, but in celebration of a life well lived and justice well served. She played the long game. James Harrington mused, his own glass raised. Most people would have confronted the betrayal immediately. Martha turned it into a teaching moment for the ages. She always said the best lessons were expensive ones, I added. Bradley and Sandra paid with their freedom, their reputations, and their futures. But perhaps they gained something too. The chance to become better people, even if that journey happens behind bars. As the evening wound down, Rebecca Thornton pulled me aside. There's something you should know. Bradley's been corresponding with the families affected by his theft from the foundation. Apology letters, offers to help however he can from prison. It seems genuine. Martha would be pleased, I said. She never wanted to destroy him, just to strip away the greed and see if anything worth saving remained underneath. 2 years have passed since that day in the conference room, when Martha's will devastated those who'd betrayed her. Bradley writes weekly now, his letters showing a maturity and remorse that might have saved him if it had come sooner. He's earned his degree in counseling, helps other inmates with their own redemption journeys, and sends every penny he earns to the foundation. Sandra took a different path, filing appeal. After appeal, each one rejected. Her letters to Marcus from prison, intercepted and used against her in court, showed no remorse, only rage at being caught. Some people learn from consequences. Others just resent them. I'm 70 now, spending my days managing Martha's legacy and watching her grandchildren grow. Tyler wants to be a doctor, inspired by the foundation's work. Emma writes stories, her grandmother's talent flowing through her young fingers. Neither speaks of visiting their parents, but both keep photos of better times when Bradley and Sandra were still capable of love. The Westbrook house echoes with new voices now. Support group meetings in the living room. Children playing in the garden during foundation events. Researchers discussing breakthrough treatments in Martha's study. The home Bradley tried to steal has become exactly what Martha envisioned, a place of healing and hope. Sometimes, late at night, I sit in Martha's chair and read her final letter to me, the one James gave me after everything was settled. My dearest Roland, if you're reading this, then justice has been served, and you're probably wondering if it was all worth it. The pain of watching our sons fall, the difficulty of maintaining the deception, the loneliness of facing it without me. It was worth it, my love. Not because Bradley and Sandra deserved punishment, though they did, but because sometimes justice is the highest form of love. By facing consequences, Bradley has a chance to become the man we once hoped he'd be. By protecting the foundation, we've saved lives that matter more than any fortune. You asked me once why I named it the Martha Chen Foundation instead of Pierce. Now you know. I was always proud to be your wife, but I needed something that was purely mine, untouchable by those who would corrupt it. My father would be proud that the Chen name stands for healing instead of just wealth. Live well, my darling. Find joy in the sunrise, peace in the garden, purpose in continuing our work. And remember, the best revenge against those who valued money over family is to show them what they missed. Love deeply, give generously, trust wisely. Until we meet again, Martha. I fold the letter carefully, returning it to its envelope. Tomorrow, there's a board meeting about expanding the foundation internationally. Next week, Tyler's science fair project on pediatric oncology research. Next month, Emma's school play, where she'll perform a scene she wrote about her grandmother. Life goes on richer for justice served and love preserved. But tonight, I want to share this story with you, to ask you a question that Martha would have asked. What matters more in your life, the size of an inheritance, or the legacy of love you leave behind? Have you seen families torn apart by greed, or united by values stronger than money? If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to comment below with your own thoughts on family justice and what truly matters in life. Like this video if you believe that consequences can be the greatest teacher, and subscribe to hear more stories about the triumph of justice over greed. Share this with someone who needs to hear that integrity is worth more than any inheritance. Thank you for joining me on this journey through loss, betrayal, and ultimately redemption. May you find in your own life the wisdom Martha showed in death, that love carefully given and justice thoughtfully served can transform even the darkest chapter into a story worth telling. Remember, we all face choices every day between easy money and hard integrity. Choose wisely. Your true inheritance isn't what you take, but what you leave behind in the hearts of those who loved you. Until next time, live with purpose, love with wisdom, and never underestimate the power of patience wedded to justice. Peace be with you all.